As you guys all know, I made a video about in December where I talked about how Wano had caused me to lose faith in One Piece and almost lose faith in Oda himself.
Enough! I can't take it no more. This is the one thing I thought Oda couldn't mess up, and he did. I can't believe it. I can't.
And for the longest times, contemplating Wano, contemplating the unfulfilled plot lines, the characters that fell flat, the characters that I really had a lot of hopes for really fall by the wayside. It really damaged how I viewed One Piece. It damaged how I absorbed the series. So much so that the only thing that really kept me going, the only thing that kept me excited about One Piece was the agendas and the funny power scaling and the headcanon that we could come up so I can enjoy the series in a casual way. But leading into Egghead, me having that whole premise of, man, like, what is it that I'm really gonna hang on to now, because Wano really did a lot of damage for me. And I know people liked Wano, but at the same time, for me, I just didn't. But the only thing that really got me excited was the fact that that bum Houston's kid got destroyed. That was like, ah, yes, good meal, he's out of here. I hate that guy.
No hockey, no conqueror's hockey, no bag, nothing. Zero bag. You have no bag, none. Kid has no bag, zero. I thought Giannis was bad.
However, leading into Egghead, my expectations were at an all-time low. But as we moved into Egghead and as things progressed and things got better, as we get Cross Guild and then we get the abolishment of the Warlords, and we're getting Garp versus Kuzan and Boa Hancock and Blackbeard and Rayleigh and Kobe and Sabo and the Flame Emperor and Lelouch. I call it Leloucia, but people like to make fun of me for that one. But yeah, anywho, we get all these events that are coming up, and then you have the actual arc of itself, Egghead, with Kuma and Bonney and Vegapunk and Kizaru and York and St. Saturn. Now those two are a little meh, we'll get into that later, but you see how as we get into Egghead, there's a lot of things that I saw in Egghead that I didn't know that One Piece could still bring out, that joy, that passion, that fervor, that connection to characters, and that investment in the theme of Egghead, which is sacrifice. And I want to get into that in depth later on in this video, but just that theme itself, it resonated with me and a lot of my personal beliefs as well, even at a religious way. Like, it resonated with me deeply. So getting into Egghead, I felt like my faith had been restored in the fact that Oda can still write this way, that Oda can still make me feel this way, that Oda still has got it in him, that it wasn't just that he was wearing the 45 Jordan jersey, he was wearing it for a year or two, but then he put the 23 back on his back, and all of a sudden he's going for another 3P. And I said, oh, this is great. This is what I've been waiting for. So talking about Egghead, talking about the general strengths of what we received in its characters and its antagonists per se, you know, the plot, the theme, sometimes even the settings. I do have some criticisms that I want to get into. I'll get into that in the middle of the video, but overall, Egghead was just such a good, positive arc for me, and I wanted to take the time to really explain to you guys the things that I liked, the things that I may have not liked, but then the things that I really, really loved. Because when you really think about going through a disappointing arc and living through something for 3 to 4 years and thinking about all these expectations and all these things that you hope happen, and I know I'm not writing the story, so at the end of the day, the author is going to write what he writes. But as a reader, and I'm the one who has to absorb this material, when the material is not resonating with me, especially with something that I hold so dear, it hurts. So Egghead for me was therapeutic. It was medicine. It was medicine to my One Piece soul. So let's get into it and let's talk about what it is that I liked at the very beginning, because there's so much to unpack with Egghead Island, man. Like, this was a good arc, y'all. So let's talk about what we liked, right? So when I'm talking about I'm talking about, yeah, I come across it and I'm like, yeah, you know, this is good. This is good stuff. We're talking about the events around the world, because this is all happening before we get into the real meat and bones of Egghead, before we get to the water eddy, before we run into Bonney. We're talking about how the Warlord System has been abolished. And I want to start there because that's really where everything starts to kick off. The Warlords have been abolished. So you have Kobe and Fujitora going after Boa Hancock and then running into Blackbeard. And then you have the Cross Guild with Crocodile and Mihawk and Buggy. And then you have Blackbeard making moves, right? So things are happening all over the world. Kid got destroyed. What a meal. Fantastic. We're all hype about that. Law packs up Blackbeard. Great meal there. So this is a lot of good stuff going on behind the scenes. But let's really focus on the Warlord System, right? And this is some of the things that I love about Oda, because then we're getting into world building, where a lot of people think world building is setting different islands and things of that nature. But world building is a lot more about what happens with certain characters, the lore of characters, the actual development of characters that happen outside of the main story, right? So we're talking about the Warlords. The Warlord system has been a part of One Piece from its genesis. I know it's something Oda decided to add on later, but for the most part, we've always known about the Warlord since early pre-time skip. So to see that system finally be abolished, to see a system that has been a problem, that has been an issue, that's been brought up by Cobra, that's been brought up by King Riku, and it was brought up by Fujitora, to see that actually come into fruition and see the aftermath of that was like, okay, the world is changing, things are moving around. From a political landscape, the world is different. From a power dynamic, the world is different. The pirate world is affected. The government is affected. We're seeing the scientific group that is producing the alternative system to the Warlords. It's coming to the fray. But then you're thinking, well, how strong are these SSG guys? What is the alternative that they've put up? So us seeing Boa Hancock, Kobe, Blackbeard, and then the baby Mihawk, the little baby Boa, seeing them come up, they're pacifistas, what we're calling them Seraphim, that's their official name. Seeing them come up and see the warlords that we used to revere, seeing them in a smaller form but mixed with Lunarian blood, and still have similar skills. Like, I mean, the baby Mihawk is cutting mountains for God's sakes, to the point where Blackbeard's got to put up Haki just to block everything, right? If an Emperor of the Sea's putting up Haki to block you, it's a serious business. So getting into that it allowed me to immerse myself back into the world of One Piece, where I'm like, okay, this is it. This is a new world here. These Seraphim are dangerous enough for an Emperor to be on guard, which means if we're going back to like, not the new world, we're going back to like the regular Grand Line with all those Mickey pirates out there. You send the Seraphim out there, they getting packed. They're actually genuinely come up with a viable fix to world order that the warlords used to do, but this time they're under the control of the government. So they're actually exerting more control around the world, which will change the whole concept of the pirate system, because the warlord system in itself was we're gonna look past all the evil that you do for the sake of controlling the underworld. Now they can actually exert control over the underworld, over the pirate world, and still have complete full control, right? So it's an essence of the government taking more control over things, right? So this was a good thing for me to see. It was good for me to open my mind. I'm like, okay, the world building here is good, right? This is something that I'm interested in. But then you get into the dynamics of Boa Hancock and Blackbeard and Kobe, and how most people revere Boa Hancock, but we don't really get to see how dangerous Boa is. And I think one of the sad things is I wish Boa would have gotten a little bit more credit for how dangerous she really is. And she turned all the Blackbeard pirates into stone, so that's fine, but we just need to see a little bit more of how fearsome Boa really can be. Even Kobe was brought to his knees, but Blackbeard's an Emperor of the Sea, so it makes sense. Blackbeard subjugates Boa, choking her out, Kobe's getting destroyed, and then Rayleigh comes in, but then Rayleigh says this great thing where it's like, yo, listen, Blackbeard, I would have lost. It's in the official, don't get mad, it's not an agenda, it's in the official. He said, listen, I can't take Blackbeard 1v1. So you're building up Blackbeard at the same time, so we're getting a lot of additional stuff in the world outside of the Straw Hats, outside of the main plot, that actually allows us to enjoy the expansion of the world and more exposition into what's going on. So I thought that was really good, and that was a great start. So then we get into the Cross Guild, and this is where things get interesting, because listen, we love Crocodile. I think Crocodile's the best villain in One Piece. That's for another video. I just love Crocodile. No shame to Dope. He's GOAT, right? Crocodile and Mihawk. We don't know much about Mihawk's character in general, besides the fact that he's an ore farming, world's strongest swordsman in the world, allegedly, yada, yada, yada. We all know that. But to see Crocodile still have the cachet that he has in the world by being able to, one, have a casual one-on-one conversation with Mihawk, to convince Mihawk that, hey, I have trust issues just like you, which is why we choose to operate alone. But now that the Warlord system is done, what better person to partner up with than someone that understands where you're coming from? Remember, you're the Marine hunter. You don't like the Marines anyway. You cut them up for sport. So you got to join with me. You're seeing that Crocodile is more of what we thought he was. Cunning, dark, charismatic, and convincing leader. Like, he's a leader. Crocodile is like legitimate, a bona fide boss, mafia boss type leader. So the fact that he's running into Mihawk and say, yo, come join with me, then he pulls up to Buggy. He's like, bro, you owe me money, brother. We're like from an episode of Sopranos, like, yo, where's the envelope at, player? Like, you owe me money. It's a shakedown here. You either die, you work for me. It's textbook Italian Sicilian mafia behavior. So seeing Crocodile move in that way, get his Billionberry bounty to put respect on his name, getting Mihawk get his Billionberry bounty to put respect on his name, and see those two come together was something that we just didn't see coming. Nobody could have told us that Crocodile and Mihawk would ever be working together. Now, there was a clash in Marineford, but again, it's all headcanon until it happens. So to see that happen was great, because again, we're adding another layer of world building. We're adding another bounty system with the Cross Guild. Buggy's still doing his gimmick like, oh, I'm accidentally super charismatic, I'm accidentally an Emperor of the World. but the cunning and the smarts of Mihawk to say, hey, Crocodile, you know, this ain't really a bad idea. Like, let's just use Buggy as a cover, right? It's your textbook, we have a cover boss while the real bosses are behind the scenes. It's textbook mafia stuff, right? So the Cross Guild is basically the Sicilian mafia, right? With an idiot in charge. It's so funny to see, and I like it because now they got bounties for people. So that was also good. Again, adds another layer of world building. We get a deeper exposition into these characters. So things are really good and they're ramping up. I'm like, okay, so I like Buggy, I like Mihawk, I'm invested here. We got a little bit of Boa, we got more Blackbeard stuff. So these are characters that I'm liking and I'm resonating with, and we're getting some really good stuff from them. So we're moving forward into the events around the world. We're shaping One Piece, we're shaping the world again. We're going into that, and we had that in Wano, but a lot of the times it was more of just more questions that we needed to answer. Here we were kind of getting answers of what has happened already, what is happening, what is currently being formed around us. Things are getting done, so it was good. And then another thing that I really liked as well was Vegapunk. I think Vegapunk's hubris is something that not a lot of people talked about. Maybe it's because I just haven't seen it, but when we're talking about Vegapunk, when we're first introduced to him, we're thinking about his idealism, right? His ideology of, I am this morally gray scientist and the world can be healed by science. Look at all of my inventions. People don't have to go hungry. People don't have to go unclothed. I can fix everything in the world with my brain. And I have to separate myself into 6 people in order to do that, because the more I can discover and the more I can make, the more I can help humanity. Therefore, I can save humanity via science, via scientific discovery. And it's so funny that he almost tried to use science to heal and fix humanity, but it was his own humanity, his greed that he separated York, that became his own undoing, that betrayed himself. He eventually betrayed himself due to his own humanity, because another side of him actually wanted to be a celestial dragon and was willing to sell out his own science for the sake of personal gain. I just think it's so refreshing to see the idealism of someone who's technically not a bad person suffer consequences for their own human nature when they try to act as if human nature is not a real factor, as if it's not something that needs to be constantly, consistently managed. You can discover as many things as you want. You can make so many things that will better the lives of so many different people, but how people use it will always be the most important thing. The most important thing here is the hearts of man and how the hearts of man can stay connected to that morally good side, because our hearts can be wayward, and the wayward heart of York versus all of the other. I mean, Lilith is technically supposed to represent evil, for God's sakes, and it wasn't even Lilith that betrayed him, right? So just seeing that idea of Vegapunk suffering the consequences of his own hubris, and it was like almost an innocent hubris. It's like a pride that he didn't know. Pride cometh before the fall. You got the whole messaging and the whole gimmick here. So that's something that I also liked, and that was earlier on in Egghead as well. So it was like, okay, so Vegapunk, this is good, right? We're getting the guy that we've been looking for the longest time. We're getting a deeper look into him and who he is. So I just really like that element as well. But then you get into Saint Saturn and like the idea of Saint Saturn, right? And now my editor probably gonna play the clip of me.
We have a name for one of the Gorosei, Saint J. We are a Gorosei. I told you, I knew it. Saint J, it's here. I gotta get dreads down. That's crazy. People call me a slave master. Hey man, power is power. Cry more, nigga. Cry.
As my grandpappy, I just want you to know that wasn't me. It's an AI generated video. My editor he made an AI version of me saying that. So just if he puts it out there, it's not me. I just want you to know that. That's all AI.
Yeah, go ahead and get them dreads, partner.
It's not. I would never associate myself, you know, with someone like Saint Saturn. He's a terrible, terrible person. Anywho,
y'all want this great cleansing? All I need to do is press one button and y'all all gonna get Lulucia. All of y'all, keep it up.
Enough with the jokes, but the point is that the idea of Saint Saturn was good. The idea of Saint Saturn was a menace, like this Gorosei, this evil guy, you know, this cunning overlord, I rule the world type of guy, the aura, the commanding admirals at whim. Like the idea of him was a good idea. So when he first pulled up to the frame, we're first seeing him, we're like, oh, this is good. Like we got a menacing villain from a political and power influence, not by physicality, even though he had his whole little gimmick. The ability to actually exert power over people like Bonney, Vegapunk, Kizaru was menacing in a sense. So that's something I enjoyed. But then after that, things get a little weird, and there's some things that I had a little bit of gripes in as we go on into the arc, and as you know, we're kind of jumping back and forth and pointing things out that bothered me a little bit. And I think it's time we get into that. So let's talk about what I disliked. And this isn't going to be a controversial opinion. I think it shouldn't be a controversial opinion, but the Gorosei, right? We talked about Saint Saturn previously, so let's delve into that. The Gorosei, how do I say this? I'm just going to be frank. They suck. I think the Gorosei suck, and I didn't like them because there's this air of we are cunning, we plan ahead, we have all these great cleansings, we are the de facto power of the world, we are the ones that hold the balance of the world, which means we are the most competent, well-educated people in the world. But that whole idea of the Gorosei slowly starts to die once Nika becomes involved. The moment Nika becomes a concept, the moment Nika appears, the moment we find out about Luffy's fruit, the moment we found out that they knew about Nika this whole time, and the countermeasures that they failed to take with Nika led to concerns where the community was like,
why ain't no way, bro?
I mean, you knew the whole time, but you kind of didn't know the whole time. And then people are coming up with excuses for the Gorosei, like, oh, like, I don't know, they didn't think it'd be a threat, they didn't know if Luffy would awaken the fruit, but they knew it. You know what I'm saying? These guys are giving a whole exposition on the truth of the Gum Gum fruit, as if they knew the whole time. I'm like, yo, what's up with these guys? So a lot of this is in Wano, but don't get me wrong, because it's established in Wano, but then because of the perception that we gained of them in Wano, it creeps into Egghead where you're looking at them and you're kind of giving this Stephen A. Smith unbothered look as Saint Saturn is pulling up, then the rest of the Gorosei are pulling up, and it's like, you know, you're trying to think like, who are these guys, and are they just despicable for the sake of being despicable? Do they have any unique qualities, or are they just soulless, lack of morality, sociopathic villains, right? Like, just humans are insects, power, humans are insects. And I'm just like, man, is there anything about these guys that's going to compel, is there anything about these guys that I'm going to feel drawn to as a character? But no, they're really just scum. That's it. The Gorosei are just scum, and they're a little incompetent. I lied. They're extremely incompetent. Because the moment Saint Saturn steps into Egghead, he's like, yeah, look at me, I'm evil. Ha ha, Bonney, come here. Ha, your father's a slave. LOL, Sanji, I-beam. Ah, Bonney, I-beam. Random marine fodder, I-beam. Like, yeah, oh my god. And then what? He's a giant spider with regenerative Mickey powers. I'm like, all right, cool. So now, what do I get with Saint Saturn? What is it? He's a scum. We all knew the Celestial Dragons are scum. Okay, he's evil. We all knew they were evil. What is it about Saint Saturn that's supposed to make me drawn to him and be like, okay, this guy, man, he's different. They're all kind of a collective. And then the idea of all 5 of them coming there to stop a message and to stop Nika, I get it was a cool moment to see. Like, on paper, the designs are menacing. The idea of them being demons, it's all menacing. So they have menacing designs, but they really spend most of the time in the arc being largely ineffective. I mean, you got the Shy Halud, which is Sanji's dad. I think it's Saint Shepherd or whatever. You got him doing his sucking gimmick. You got Saint Marcus, the Moltres that's running around shooting hyper beams everywhere, can't find nothing, right? Talking with York. And then you got Saturn just getting blocked by Guard Point Chopper and just being incompetent from start to finish. Like, this guy really didn't draw any emotions out of the reader outside of just being a scumbag. And that's fine. Sometimes that serves its purpose, but I guess it's more that I expected more from the Gorosei. I expected a little bit more masterful, I think ahead, I'm 5 steps ahead of you type. But it never seemed like they were 5 steps ahead of anybody. It seems like they were getting outsmarted left, right, and center. Like they were being run amok by a Vegapunk who had died. A Vegapunk that waited 10 minutes to give his actual message, and these guys are running around playing Looney Tunes with Emmett the robot. And I'm just like, man, listen, I just have to get this off my chest because the Gorosei just were disappointing. I just think they're pitiful. I think they're incompetent, and I didn't enjoy them. Like, I really didn't. I think Saint Saturn served his purpose for Bonney and for Kuma as playing the generic evil scumbag. He served his purpose as the antagonist, but the character, the standalone character of Saint Saturn was inconsequential, was ineffective. Just like, no, don't care about him at all. The 2 Gorosei that I'd say that had a showing that I found at least intriguing to see, and it wasn't even from a character perspective, it was more from like a feat perspective. You got Top Man, Luffy's trying to punch him with the Ryo in Gear 5 and he still gets hurt. There's the Conqueror's Haki Roar from Top Man, that was very impressive. And then Nojuro, cool design, sword gimmick, right? You know, he's cutting all the pacifistas. He's just cool, and also he's the most popular one because he's Gandhi. Everyone calls him Gandhi, so we like Nojuro, right? We just do, but the rest of them, You know, so the Gorosei, I think they just fell flat. So that's something that I didn't like. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot to love. This is not really a negative video, but I had to get them off my chest. The other thing that I find concerning, which has been an issue for a while, and I think that it'll be due for a bigger video as well, is the Straw Hats themselves. The Straw Hats have now become this one entity, right? Instead of being individuals that used to get their own unique focus and their own small developments here and there, they've kind of become just the Straw Hats. If you know what I mean, they're no longer Nami, Robin, Chopper, Usopp, Brook, Frankie, Jinbei, Zoro, Sanji, Luffy. They are the Straw Hats. They've turned into NPCs in a sense, and they all get their unique moments. Like Chopper, I mean, Chopper blocked Saturn in a guard point. Nami, what did she really do? Brook froze some pacifistas, I get. Robin had a nice, you know, emotional moment with Saul being alive, and then she took heavy damage off screen and has major injuries, so I guess Chopper did something there. Jinbei's a glorified delivery man. Sanji did his stuff. Sanji and the Vegapunk moment was good. Him being clued on what was going on with Vegapunk was fine. Him blocking Kizaru was fine, right? Not individual character moments, but cool moments. So you're like, oh, great. Zoro, he fought Kaku. He fought the Mihawk Seraphim. Like, he fought Lucci. Zoro did what Zoro normally does, which is look cool and aura fart. And then Luffy, who's really just I'm the hero of the arc. I'm here to save everyone. Luffy really just played the savior role. Luffy didn't do anything from a character perspective that either advanced his character and made you see a different side of him or a side that you've always seen, but you're like, oh, that's a great moment from Luffy. It's more of Luffy just being Luffy. And again, that's fine if you just want to read for the sake of Luffy being Luffy, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for me as a reader, when I'm looking for the Straw Hats the way they were in pre-time skip, and maybe I should just abandon, you know, that whole concept, me looking for the Straw Hats to have their own unique individual moments. Like, for example, look at Water 7, right, with Usopp. Look at Nami and yelling at Zoro and Luffy when they're caught in the buildings during the Aqua Laguna, and them screaming that Robin sacrificed herself, and Sanji in the sea train, Frankie with Usopp, like those little, even Chopper rolling up to Frankie house, and do you know what I'm saying? Like, these are the moments that we used to see from the Straw Hats where they didn't get a lot of screen time, but in the screen time that they got, you got something unique and special for them that you could, as a reader, remember and be like, I resonate with that. What a great character moment for Usopp. Usopp, the most he did in this arc is get choked out by Kizaru. I mean, it was funny, but like, you want a little bit more. I mean, Frankie was pretty cool. I think Frankie was disappointing because it seemed like Vegapunk was his guy. In the pre-time skip and, you know, the 3D2Y, he went to Vegapunk's lab. Frankie and Vegapunk, that was his guy. That was Frankie's moment, right? He's the engineer. He's the one who does all this. You know, he's the shipwright. He's the builder. So him interacting with someone who is also a builder and a creator could have been a real cool character moment. And we had things in passing, but we never had a moment with Frankie where you sat down, I'm like, that's a great moment for Frankie. We had a feat, you know, he shoots a laser beam, he saves Luffy with the strong rights. You have those cool feat moments, but you don't have those individual character, progressive, developmental moments that you need for us to feel connected to the Straw Hats as individuals and not this amoeba-like entity that has become the crew of the Straw Hats, right? I think that's something that we need to talk about later on, because post time skip has had that formula for a very long time now, and there's a lot of people that I have complaints for it, but that's just another one of the things in Egghead where I'm like, it's not the end of the world, but you just wish you got a little bit more of the Straw Hats there. And then another thing that I disliked, that I think it's more of a petty gripe than anything, but I'm sure people felt this, right? And this is maybe from a week to week reading perspective, people can feel this. If you're reading it in a binge, it'll probably be easier to absorb, and sometimes that's just how some of these things need to be read, so I can give y'all that caveat, that's fine. But Vegapunk's speech, while the content was good, while the content was informative, you know, learning about how the world had been destroyed before, learning about the ancient weapons, hearing more about Jewel Boy, hearing about an ancient war, hearing more about the world government and their conniving schemes. This was all important for the world because the whole world was listening. So this is world building again. Vegapunk's speech is world building. It's expanding the past. It's expanding the lore. So it's important from a plot perspective. But the time it takes for us to get there, the time it takes for the whole speech to go on, where it gets to a point where you're so excited and then it's lingering, and then we're freezing, and then we're waiting 10 minutes to get coffee, and then as we're waiting, you have the Gorosei running around doing Looney Tunes and Tom and Jerry with Emeth the robot, right? And the hockey knot stuff, and Atlas trying to save everyone from those Juro, and then the Giants trying to save everyone from Top Man, and then Bonney, and I see a Nika is future, and like, all of that stuff gets jumbled into this Vegapunk speech where they're trying to stop the transmission, and it gets to a point where it's like, I'm interested in the speech, but now we're dragging this on chapter after chapter after chapter after chapter, and Vegapunk is still yapping, and he's still yapping, and he's saying a lot of conjecture, and he's saying a lot of his personal thoughts while also giving us information, but not really giving us enough information, because then we have still more questions, and then we keep going, and then we're going on and on and on and on and on, and it gets to a point where you're excited that you got the message, but then it gets cut off at one of the most important parts where he's talking about Gold D. Roger, and all of that stuff, and then it gets cut off, and you're just like, wait, but what was he gonna say there? What was he gonna say? So you felt like you were left hanging at the end of the speech, but you also got enough to be like, well, the content was good, but did it really need us to take that long to get there? And I know Oda had to stretch it, and the Straw Hats had to get away, and because of that, the resolution was okay. It wasn't bad, but it was okay. And the only reason we'd say it's okay is because we came down from such a massive high with the Kuma backstory and the Kizaru stuff and Kuma punching Saturn and all the crazy emotional moments that we'd felt from the emotional Vegapunk dying. We had all this emotion. And as we're coming down, we get into this Yap Fest, and our emotions are going back down, they're going back down, and you're just seeing the Gorosei run around, and they're just running around, and then Luffy's blocking, and then you see the Giants running around, and you see the Vice Admirals running around, and you're just going, and you're doing, and then eventually by the time the arc's ended, you're kind of like right here, and you're like even killed, and you're like, oh, it's over. Cool. Yeah, and then you just get that. So it's not that the resolution was bad per se, but I think from us coming from the emotional high to us coming back down to earth, it kind of just mellowed everything out. So it didn't end on a high, it ended on a nice slow malaise. Where you can imagine, say Egghead started as like a 7 out of 10, and it slowly rose to 8, then it slows to 9, then it gets to 9, and then it gets to 10, and then from 10 it gets to 9, and then it gets to 8, and it gets to 7, and then it gets to 6, and you're so close to get to a 5, and then it ends, and you stay at the 6, right? That's kind of how it felt for me, right? So I don't know if you guys felt the same, but that's how I felt. So these are the things that I'd say I didn't particularly like. Some of the things in this list were just okay, but I had to put it under the list of dislikes because I wanted to give you guys the journey of me revisiting Egghead and the retrospective look at how Egghead really was, because it's always good to go back into these arcs and think about how you feel in retrospect. That's the whole point of the series. But now let's get back to the positive stuff, because there's a lot to love, and this is where the real meal of Egghead, this is where we're getting into, wow, this is probably the best post-time skip arc in One Piece so far. One of the things I loved the most about Egghead Island, and this is something that's so important and critical to writing, is themes. I think the theme is important because everything that you write within the arc or within the story should inherently go back to your theme. The theme isn't the most important thing in the arc, but the theme is important to making sure that the story doesn't stray too far away from the message that we're supposed to be getting and how the characters are supposed to interact and the setting and all that other stuff, right? So the theme of Egghead was sacrifice. And the thing is, like, I resonate with things like sacrifice, and this is a little personal, but like, as you guys know, I'm a God-fearing man. Like, I have a lot of strong Christian beliefs. I don't like calling myself religious because that comes with its own connotations, but that's different. But when it comes to my values, sacrifice is a massive thing, right? Jesus Christ died for sins, sacrifice, all of that. Even if you don't believe, the concept and the practical idea of the Christ-like messianic figure is all about sacrifice for the sake of others, right? So it's so funny that Oda made the theme of Egghead Island sacrifice, and then you have the Christ-like messianic figure of Kuma in a church full of crosses, right? So it's just like, all right, Oda, I see what you're doing here, right? But it's more than just Kuma. And it's more than, when you think about other characters as well, right? You think about the overall theme of One Piece, where it's more about, you know, it's more about your free will. It's about pursuing your dreams. It's about inherited will, and how sometimes to pursue your dreams, to inherit will, and in order for you to have the free will to pursue your dreams, there's things that you have to sacrifice, right? When you think about sacrifices within One Piece, you're thinking of Belmare, you're thinking of Zeph and his leg, you're thinking of Sanji's arm, you're thinking about Kyros and Rebecca, you're thinking about Corazon and Law, you're thinking about Odin. Even though it was a little Mickey, he boiled in oil for the sake of his scabbards and his kids, and you think about Otahime from Fishman Island. So we have all these beautiful examples of sacrifice, and the Kuma and Bonney, Vegapunk, even Kizaru, they all fall into this category. But another thing that we seem to maybe not emphasize too much is the Garp and Kuzan stuff. One of the things I loved about the Garp and Kuzan stuff is that we always had, one of the gripes that people have with Garp is his decision in not trying to save Ace, right? Why did Garp choose his duty over his family? And a lot of people criticize Garp for that. That's due for another video as well, but But that's also important because it's like, well, Garp, we have to know what it is about duty that ties you. Like, what is the reason? But then when he runs into Kuzan, someone that abandoned his duty for the sake of, I guess, whatever dream he has, and then Garp, who's going to save Kobe, who he considers the future of the Marines, those two clashing brought out the ethics in Garp that I think we needed. Because if you go back into the fight between Kuzan and Garp and why he's trying to save Kobe, there's this class that he's leading for young Marines, and it's almost like an ethics class. Garp is talking about how it's important. With this scenario, who do you save, the older person or the younger person? He says you always save the younger person because you're saving the future. Let the old people die, but let's save the future. Let's push the future forward. And you're seeing Garp's ethics in that moment. And the fact that his ethics are compounded upon by him going into Pirate Island by himself, virtually by himself, there's other people there, to face a lot of the Blackbeard pirates just to save Kobe. So much so that Kobe's wondering, why are you doing this to save me? He said, because you're my precious pupil and you are the future of the Marines. Therefore, I am going to sacrifice myself to let you guys get away. And in order to do that, he has to face his former pupil, who I believe he would have done the same for. And that beautiful flashback of how Garp trained Kuzan and the battleship boats and the punching, and how Garp used to confide in Kuzan and how they had a real deep friendship, which was really good stuff for Kuzan, but really good stuff for Garp, because then you see the flashback with Kobe and you see Kobe doing the battleship punching bags, and you see Kobe was nowhere near as strong as Garp, nowhere near as strong as Kuzan. The fact that Garp put so much investment into his pupils and the people that he loves dearly, it builds Garp as a character that you can really relate to. Like Garp with this grandfather-like figure, this mentor-student figure, like this guy that's really invested in the future of people. So you see Garp's disappointment in Kuzan, where he could have been the future fleet admiral, versus the hope that he has in Kobe that he will be the future fleet admiral. And those two clashing together and seeing Garp and all his character being laid before us, the development of Garp was excellent, and I loved it. I enjoyed it. I mean, Kuzan and his dilemma, his internal struggle with, I've abandoned my duty, but at the same time I have to fight the people I love, and him having to make a sacrifice to sacrifice his friendship with Garp for the sake of ideals, and Garp having to sacrifice himself for the sake of Kobe. Like, this all ties into the theme of sacrifice, and I just thought it was beautiful writing. I just thought it was really, really good. It was one of those things where I'm like, Oda, man, you still got it, boy. Yeah. He still got it. This is what I'm talking about here. This is good meal here. Mwah, fantastic. It was great, man. So just, and then another thing that I really want to highlight is the world building that we get with Garp, where we see how strong he is even at this old age. It just makes you wonder, man, if Garp was this strong now, how strong was he back then? What type of things was he able to accomplish back then? And it just gives you a glimpse into what young Garp is really like, because old Garp is wilding right now, man. He's an old man. He still got it in him, though. Shout out to King of Lightning. But then we move on from the themes, and the themes are really going to be the umbrella for all of this. But from the themes, we get to the major characters of the arc. This is where we're talking about the best part of the story. As you guys all know, as I mentioned in my Wano video, I'm a characters guy. I resonate with characters. I love characters because I like to see their decision making. I like to see why they do the things they do. What is their philosophy? What is their ideals? What have they gone through that made them do what they do? How can I relate to this character? Do I absorb what this character, what the writer is trying to convey to me with this character? Am I getting it? And am I receiving it? And before I get to the best, which is obviously Kuma, we got to start with Bonney. Now, Bonney isn't a deep character. Bonney is pretty straightforward. Bonney is pretty simple. Bonney is your damsel in distress archetype, but she's done beautifully. And I'm not saying damsel in distress to be derogatory. I'm using it as an archetype here because that's what she is. Bonney comes into Egghead angry at Vegapunk because he said, you killed my father. You're the one that made Kuma lose his humanity. So Bonney comes in angry. She comes in as the main woman, the princess that needs to be saved, heroine, right? All of that. Bonney is this conduit for the conflict of the story. Bonney is this small, lovable, we didn't even know she was 12 at the time. She is this lovable sweetheart that misses her daddy and wants her daddy back. And we're thinking to ourselves, Bonney is so passionate about Kuma, so much so when you see this panel, and this is where art, this is how beautiful art can be, where she first sees the pacifist and Luffy's about to punch that pacifist or destroy it, and Bonnie's face of tears, pain, don't hurt my daddy. That panel is powerful because it's displaying the level of care, hurt, and passion that Bonney has for her father, this man that has been painted as the tyrant Kuma. Well, why was he called tyrant? How can someone like Bonney love this man so much? Who was Kuma? Bonney is the perfect conduit to make us ask the question, Who is Kuma? What did he do? Why did he lose his memories? We're asking questions now, and that's what a real good writer does. A real good writer gets you to the point where you want to know what's happening next, where you want to know, why is this a thing? Who is that and what are they? So that's when you get to the point with the giant bubble, the Kuma bubble, yeah, the little paw that has Kuma's memories. And Bonney enters that, and you get the glimpse of that sad figure in little baby Kuma crying in the hills as a slave, suffering in pain as he's beaten by his fellow slaves. And instantly you can feel like, okay, this is gonna be one of them backstories where Oda's gonna break me. You could tell. Now, I foolishly got mad when we went away from it, and I demanded Oda give us the flashback in a very, aggressive, professional way, where I said I'd write a strongly worded email, and I got paid back in droves. It was a very aggressive, painful flashback, but it was so needed, and despite the pain and suffering, it was so worth it because it reminded us how great Oda is at emotional writing. It reminded us, because getting into Kuma and who he was and what he represented is, where do I begin? When I think of Kuma, I think of him as the ultimate man that embodies the Judeo-Christian ideal, right? The messianic, Jesus-like figure. He embodies, well, not Jesus per se, but the Christian figure, right? Because Nika's really more of the messianic figure here. But you're thinking of a man that has gone through so much pain. He's gone through so much suffering. He's been enslaved at the hands of systematic corruption, of a world that is morally devoid of good. It's a world where there's some people that can spend their whole lives living in a nice small town where everyone's good, everyone's happy-go-lucky, and they'll go through like natural tragedies and things of that nature. Kumo's exposed to a world full of malevolence, violence, hatred, prejudice, evil. Think of every bad thing you can think of that can happen to somebody, and it happened to Kuma. From being enslaved as a child to being racially profiled because he's a buccaneer, so he was enslaved as a result of the past sins of the buccaneer, to watching his father get executed right before him for trying to cheer him up, to watching his mother being taken away and killed off screen, not knowing how, not knowing why, just knowing that she died for no reason, to being enslaved on God Valley and hunted like a dog, to saving everyone because of Ivankov and Jenny, to then going into a church to try and give back to people the same way his father probably did, as we see his father was also a clergyman as well, to him using his fruit for good and healing the old people and healing them of, their sickness, only for him to run into corruption and power-hungry monsters like King I Got One More in Me Bakori, and dealing with that constant disrespect of the citizen, of the lower class, so much so that he gets imprisoned for it. Then we have the revolutionaries come in. They liberate the kingdom. The King Bakori tries to come back. Then the world government comes in to take them over again, and then he has to escape the kingdom. They kidnap his love interest, Jenny. Jenny is then completely brutalized off screen. She is forced to have a child against her own will. She's forcibly given a terminal illness, dies from that terminal illness. The baby that she leaves behind has a terminal illness. She tells Kuma she loves him. Then Kuma says, I'm gonna take care of this baby instead of Jenny. Gets attached to the baby, takes care of the baby, learns of the baby's sickness, then moves heaven and earth to find a way to cure this baby sickness. That's not even his, by the way, but it's now his. It's his daughter. So much so to the point where he has to sacrifice his humanity. He basically has to kill himself to save Bonney. And he does it without even batting an eyelid. No hesitation. He doesn't think about it. He doesn't ponder. He doesn't sweat. He doesn't do none of that. He just says, if it helps her survive, I'll do it without a second thought. With the biggest smile on his face. How many of you could be in that situation and react the way Kuma did? And be honest. Be honest. Now, this is fiction, so obviously, it's hard, but we're talking about ideals here. We're talking about fiction. We're talking about putting ourselves in, as the reader, into the shoes of the character and understanding how hard it would be to make that decision. It is such a blessing to witness a character display that level of ideal morality that we all aspire to be, but we all suffer from the consequences of how evil this world can be, that for us it's unrealistic. So to see it on paper allows you to immerse yourself into the world and just think about how amazing it would be to see a man like that before our very eyes. So you get to just enjoy Kuma for the beautiful soul and the beautiful self-sacrifice that he's given for this beautiful baby girl, and to see this baby girl love him and adore him and know, oh, my daddy's such a good man, my daddy's amazing, my daddy's the best in the world. But then the pure evil of the world government still not allowing those letters that he was writing to his baby girl to not be seen, so much so that she gets abandonment issues and thinks her daddy, who's the best man in the world, abandoned her. Oh my God, that nurse, I'm so glad she got hurt. She needed it. She needed to get hurt. I hate her. I hate her. Hate her. Hope she burns. I'm angry. Sorry, I need to breathe. Okay. I'm back in. And then just to see Kuma have a hand in this like divine intervening way with the Straw Hats, where he's slowly helping them progress, and he's watching Luffy, and he's helping the Straw Hats in Thriller Bark, he's helping the Straw Hats in Sabaody, he's helping them with their ship in Sabaody. Like, Kuma is just such a major character, arguably one of the most important side characters we've had in the entire story. And what makes it good is that his importance is matched by his magnitude as a man, and his character is so great. Kuma is a great character. He's such a good, well-written, beautiful, resonatory, I don't even think that's a word, but you know, you resonate with him. Like, he's such a beautifully written character that it's so hard to not rank this arc in one of your top arcs, because a character, there's something that a good character can really do for an arc. And Kuma and Bonney together, those two and their dynamic, make this arc such a strong arc. So it's like, for me, I just enjoyed reading about Kuma. I enjoyed the pain, even though it hurt me so much. The fact that I was in pain, the fact that I could cry, the fact that I needed it to end because I was suffering so much, is testament to how effective Oda's writing was with him, that it was able to draw the emotions out of the reader. So for me, Egghead was like, yes, this is what I know Oda can do. This is the same man that made me cry over a ship. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, this is what Oda does. This is an example of how good he can write compared to the other things that I've seen in the past. So whenever I think about Oda, I'm thinking about this person. I'm thinking about these standards. I'm thinking about what he can do here. So I just want people to understand this is what this man can do. And like, the best part is, like, it's more than just Kuma and Bonney. They are the linchpin of the arc. Kuma is the foundation of this arc. Like, he really is. Kuma's the foundation of this arc, because the theme again is sacrifice. So then you get into Kizaru, right? And the antagonist of this story. Kizaru is also interesting because while he may not be a threat-ish from a power scaling perspective to Luffy, because he's now Gear 5 and he's a little broken, you know, if all the Straw Hats gang up on him, maybe he'd lose, I don't know. But the idea of Kizaru appearing, it brings you back to pre-time skip. It brings you back to Sabaody, and you feeling this imminent threat, right? And one thing that you always need in a story, especially with conflict, is threat. You need a threat. You need, like, oh my God, things may not go to plan. So when Kizaru pulls up, he pulls up as a menace, like instantly destroying the Vega Force 1, cornering Frankie, cornering Luffy, choking Usopp, trying to kill Vegapunk nonstop to eventually killing Vegapunk. Like, Kizaru was the best antagonist in this arc, and his was a good antagonist for a majority of this arc, right? And I think one of the things that I enjoyed about Kizaru the most was the fact that we actually got a glimpse into who he was, with his relationship with Sentomaru, with his relationship with Kuma, Vegapunk, and Bonney, and him being with them as Vegapunk's trying to figure out the sapphire disease that Bonney has, and seeing them dance together, seeing them. This guy was doing the Nika dance. He was dancing with the ops. I was like, Kizaru, what are you doing? Right? That was funny. Don to toe, right? Don to toe. Right now we got the little ring in the anime. Seeing Kizaru and his investment in his friendship with Vegapunk and his investment with his friendship with Sentomaru and Kuma, seeing him then have to defeat his nephew, to crush his nephew, to kill Vegapunk, you could feel the pain in those decisions, because you could tell he was a little wobbly. You could tell after he got punched by Gear 5 Luffy and Luffy passed out, Kizaru was laying down on the floor. He was hurt, but you could tell, I don't think he had it in him anymore. But if there's one criticism that I have to draw him, right, and he embodied the theme of sacrifice, where he had to sacrifice his friends and his family for the sake of the duty in the Marines. Now, that sacrifice was great in a standalone concept, but one of the things that I would say I'd have to criticize is that with Kizaru, especially in the scene where you see his emotions and him clapping back at Akainu, and you're seeing him be a human instead of this, you know, nonchalant gimmick soldier, you're seeing a human come out. The caveat here is that I wish I got a little bit more into why Kizaru holds his duty to such a high regard. Why was his responsibility to the Marines greater than his best friend? What was it in his past that makes him so loyal to the Marines? Because you can't just say it's because he's an admiral. Kuzan left. Even with Garp, this is the same criticism I have with Garp. We don't need a whole backstory. We just need, as a reader, we need to understand, oh, Kizaru is choosing his friends over this because this is his motivation as a Marine. This is what he stands for as a Marine, because it can't just be, I'm a corporate cog. This is the way of the world, because that's a shallow reason to kill your best friend. Because you're a corporate cog, is that it? I don't think a reader would think that's a good enough reason. Maybe I don't want to speak for all readers, but me as a reader, I don't think that's a good enough reason. And that's not to criticize Kizaru, because I love Kizaru. But if there's one criticism I had, I would need that from him. I need a little bit more from him to really buy into the Kizaru sacrifice, right? We needed that, but overall, he was good. But then, from Kizaru sacrificing his best friend to his best friend himself, Vegapunk, I think Stella Vegapunk was good. I enjoyed Vegapunk Stella because he, like Bonney, also served the damsel in distress archetype, but in a bit of a different way, where he has such a great threat to the world because of his mind. You know, the thing with the Mother Flame, him having the knowledge of the Mother Flame, him researching the Void Century, him giving us more context. Like, Vegapunk himself is like this device, this world building device, that every time he speaks, the world gets larger. Every time he speaks, the world expands. So Vegapunk Stella as a standalone was such a important and interesting character, because every time you talked, you just thought, I'm gonna learn more about this story through him. You got excited every time Vegapunk really saw things. So when Vegapunk's life was in danger, you thought, oh my God, my answers are in danger. Oh my God, the answers to the questions that we all have, Vegapunk probably got a lot of them, so we need him to be alive. So hey, Vegapunk, don't die, man. So the impending threat of Vegapunk's life made the reader feel as though, okay, well, actually, I don't want Vegapunk to die. I kind of want him to go with the Straw Hats. Even if he doesn't become a Straw Hat, it'd be nice to hear a lot more about the world from Vegapunk, right? And I already talked about the hubris thing and the pride thing and the York thing. So overall, like, Vegapunk was good. I loved Vegapunk in this arc. So when you have 4 characters and you have 3 of them being like one of the main subjects of the arc, and then you have the antagonist, you got the lifeblood of Egghead being something that's a very high for me. This is where you get Egghead, one of the best arcs we've had in One Piece, I'd say. Like, it's up there. I would say Egghead would definitely hit my top 10. I'd say in post time skip, I'd probably put it number 1 because of these things that I've told you that I've loved. So when we're getting into how everything ties together and the conclusion, this is where things get iffy for the future, because this is something that we always have to think about, is that it was foreshadowed because Vegapunk separated himself into 6 people, and he has Punk Records, which is overall his brain. So technically Vegapunk is that just giant brain. So the Stella that you see isn't really Vegapunk, so it's like a weird concept. The whole theme and idea of sacrifice and how powerful that sacrifice is when someone dies, right? The feeling of the sacrifice is whatever you sacrifice is permanently sacrificed, right? There's a level of finality that really drives home the theme and concept of sacrifice. Kizaru killing his best friend and him having the weight of that on his heart for the rest of his life. Kuma sacrificing himself for the Bonney, and Bonney having the weight of that on for the rest of her life. Vegapunk having the weight of him killing Kuma for the rest of his life. Saturn being the pure evil man that he is, enacting that order that permanently scarred Kuma. All these things hold such a heavy weight that as a reader, anytime you see those people on screen, you're feeling the weight of sacrifice that allows those characters to be who they are. The weight of Ace dying will always be something that you'll see in Luffy and in Sabo. The weight of Whitebeard dying, you're always gonna see the weight of that decision and how Ace was, you know, he tried to survive. These are things that I have cause of concern for, because now in Elbaf we're getting glimpses of, oh, Kuma might be restored. Vegapunk Stella, we actually have a clone, so Vegapunk just coming back. And while that might have been built up, there's concerns that I have about that, because what is that going to do for the weight of the sacrifice when we look back at Egghead in retrospect, where Vegapunk's getting stabbed, or Vegapunk is sobbing, weeping, and crying because he has to kill Kuma for the sake of Bonney, knowing how great of a man he is, only for him to be restored back to his original state. What are we gonna do with that weight? Because now the sacrifice just weighs less. It's still sacrifice, but it weighs less now. It's not as heavy anymore. It's not as emotional anymore. It doesn't have the same impact that it used to. And so I asked myself, and I ask you guys as a reader, is it worth reducing the weight of the sacrifice for the sake of them coming back? Is it worth that? I just want us to think about that, because for me, that draws concern. And that's a concern with Oda's overall writing around death. Again, that's for another video in general. So I just want us as a reader to think about that, right? And I know there's some moments that I didn't hit in Egghead, mainly because I didn't think they were, I don't know, really worth talking about. Like the Giants pulling up, that was cool, I guess. The Giants are cool with the Sun God stuff. The Vice Admirals, Emeth and Joy Boy and the Hockey Knot. I mean, that stuff was interesting, right? You know, we're getting a glimpse into the Void Century. I mean, the Kuma punch, I guess I didn't talk about, right? But talking about the man Kuma, all encompasses, like that punch in isolation was one of the best punches in One Piece, because you feel the emotion of all the pain and suffering that the flashback built up was all culminated in that one right hook into Saturn's jaw. You needed that. So yeah, that was good. That was one of the things I loved. I had left that out. But overall, I mean, Egghead in its entirety was a great arc. I think it was, to me, I'd give it like 8.5, 9 out of 10, mainly because I was so pulled in by the characters. I was so drawn in by the characters. So as a reader, as someone that had lost faith in One Piece being what I truly loved in the past, for me to kind of have that feeling and joy for One Piece again, it restored my hope in the fact that Oda can still write in this way, and he can still write in this way in the future. So for me, this felt like a love letter to the old way of Oda writing, right? So this was good. This arc, Egghead, really restored my hope that One Piece is still here and it's not going anywhere.